In the last video, we got Greymair ready for painting, and in this video, I'll be taking you through the process I use to get him ready for battle. You'll see how I use a limited number of paints to create all the different effects, and also some colour theory in action to create those warmer shadows. So here we go then, we've got him ready to go with the Zenithal Prime. And altogether, we're going to use 12 paints for our effects. And rather than using 3 different paints for the base tone, the mid-tone and the highlight, we're going to just use one colour and then add white, black and also some contrasting colours and complementary colours on the colour wheel to create the different tones. The paints I'll be using throughout the video are the Duncan Rhodes 2 Thin Coats range. I'm really impressed with these. The white's been my favourite for a long time, but I'm really happy now to be using some from the range. We're going to use an Army Painter wet palette, and this is really helpful when mixing colours, and then the Army Painter Regiment brush. Really important to mix these paints. I didn't quite get them mixed enough in the previous video, so if you get a paint mixer like this, it's perfect. It really shakes them up. But these paints also have a ball bearing in there to help you get them mixed properly. Let's start the process then. So this is how I'm going to be painting all the shades of Moonreach characters for the Moonstone game. And Greymair here is ready to go with the banner. And the donkey himself is a nice grey blue. We've got the banner, which is a richer blue, and his cloak, which is a kind of in-between colour. So we're going to start off with the banner, and for this I want to go with a nice rich blue. And I'm going to be starting off with this very dark blue, adding a little bit of white to it, and then a little bit of black. It's going to make it a little bit smokier with that black, but we're still going to get a nice deep rich blue that we'll use for our base colour. And the process I'm using to paint the model now is very simple. I'm going to go and block in all the base colours, and then once that's done we're going to add a shade. Once the shade's there, it's simply going to be 3 more layers of colour, and then we're going to build up from the base colour to the highlight. So some paints you're going to need just 1 coat for this first stage, and on some of them you're going to need 2, even 3. So for the blue, it's really nice and thick, the pigment is really rich. So I found in most places this only needed 1 coat, and I just went around and touched up some of the areas where I thought it needed a little bit more. I'm also wetting my paints down, almost 1 part water to 1 part paint. Now we're going to go and paint the cloth colour. I'm using the Skeleton Legion. This is quite dark, so I'm going to add some white to this until I get a nice beige colour. This is again the base colour. So now I'm going from the blue to beige, and I'm going to work my way around the model, just blocking in those main base colours. I found with this paint I needed to give 2 and sometimes 3 coats of this, and you can see here this is the first coat, and when that's dried you can still see through it. Once I've added the other coats, you can see here that's set really nicely. We've got a nice solid colour now. So now we can keep going and doing this with all the different stages of the model. So I'm going to work on the cloak now, and for this one I want a different blue, a little bit of a grey blue, and then I'm going to use the complementary colour on the colour wheel to create a nice smoky warm shadow. And for that I'm going to create an orange colour. And then I'm going to mix together the yellow and red. Again, it saves us getting another bottle of paint. We can just make our colours with this limited palette. And then I'm going to take some of that orange paint and mix it in. And at first it's going to go a little bit green. So keep adding more and more. And you can see here as it changes colour, it's getting slightly darker, but it's a little bit too green. So to counter that, I'm going to take some of that darker blue and add it to it, and then that's going to create just the right colour that I'm looking for. So just keep adding it, mixing it together until you're happy with the colour, and then using that as a base is going to be a nice contrast to the banner. So we're going to have the cloak and the banner, 2 different blue colours, but they're going to work really nicely together. And then we just block that in, and you can see here on the back that Zenithal is going to really come through nicely. I went with 2 coats this time, so adding the white to it and the orange really does make a difference with just how rich that pigment is. And then I'm looking at different parts of the model where I can bring out the different colours so that they work nicely together on the finished piece. So I'm going to use this on the scabbard too. Right, now on to this leather colour and a sanguine scarlet, and I'm going to mix the 2 together to create a nice rich red leather colour that I'm going to use on some of the straps and also on the leather armour that Greymair has got on his arms. So painting in his boots as well. So dotting these colours around really works nicely. You've got that beige, which is the yellow, you've got all the different blues, and then you've got this little bit of reddy brown coming through. So you're almost working off the three primary colours, yellow, red and blue, and they're all going to work and be harmonious together in the finished piece. I'm trying to keep things really simple with this process and sticking with the same brush, and you could go a little bit smaller for some of the more fiddly parts, but anytime you make a mistake you can just go back, grab some of the previous colour or the colour you've gone into and just touch it up, no problem. Next up is to take some of the leather colour on its own, and I'm going to use that for the wood. So having this for the wood and then also mixed in with the red for the different parts of the leather, again it just ties it all together, and using the limited palette I think it really works nicely when you've got the model finished because you've got all the same colours working through it. And here I'm taking some of the red, adding it to white to make the pink, just adding some of that pink on the inside of the ears, the nostrils, gums, and that little weird creature that he's got on his shoulder as well. And you can see that that's going to come through there nicely. We'll add the grey to that, starting with this dungeon stone grey. So I'm going to add some of this to the palette, and then I'm going to mix it with a little bit of white. I would say 2 parts grey to 1 part white, and then maybe half a part of blue. I just want to keep that blue theme going, so I don't want to completely just basic grey for the fur. I want a nice bluey grey, but I've got to be careful here because we've already gone for something a little bit similar for the cloak, and you can see here are the 3 different blues and bluey greys that we're going to have. And so you want the head to stand out and be separate from the cloak, but you don't want the cloak to clash too much to the banner. So it's just mixing those colours and balancing them so that they all work together. And I think that's a nice way of doing it with that dark rich blue, adding the black to it, because you get a colder shadow or base colour than you do with the cloak, which is more of a warmer shadow. And you'll find when you start adding those complementary colours or opposite colours on the colour wheel, you do tend to get the warmer shadows. And here we are then, it's all blocked in now. We've just got one more part to do though, which is the silver. I haven't used this before, so I'm going for Coat Silver. It's very dark, which is perfect for the base coat, and then I'm going to try adding some white to it and see if that makes it lighter later on. So we'll see how that turns out. I'm just blocking in that silver, and then once the whole model is completely coated with all the different base colours, it's time to add a wash. So really important to make this completely dry. You can see where I used that pink earlier and the grey going over it. It's just poking through a bit, and we'll bring that to life later on. But really happy with these colours, I think it works really well. So let's add some of this Battle Mud Wash. And I've not used this before. It's very similar in colour to Agrac's Earthshade. But I've got to say I'm really impressed with this shade. I would rank it definitely better than Agrac's Earthshade for the way it goes on the model. And also for how, once it's set and completely dried, the effect you've got. And here you can see it completely dry. Yeah, really nice. It's not shiny at all. There's no glossy parts where you don't want it to be, which can sometimes happen with the Agrac's Earthshade if it's not mixed well enough. So this is spot on. It's coated really well, got into all those crevices, and I think it's a really nice effect. Now we're on to the next stage, and we're going to use the same base colour to just start painting and bringing each of the parts of the model to life now. Now I'm not going to go completely over it like I did when I blocked in the base colour. I'm just going to cover most of the area with the paint, but trying to keep that shade coming through to act as the nice deep rich shadows. And you can see with one coat this is the effect that you're going to get on the banner. And then I'm going to now take a lighter version of that blue, and this is going to serve as our mid-tone. So we're going to take that blue and we're just going to simply add some white to it. And I like to mix it in here so I can see it directly against that base colour, and this is going to give you a good idea about just how dark or light to take it. I want to go for a good tabletop ready standard, so I'm going to go for base, mid-tone and highlight, but you could go with as many tones and layers as you like to get a nice smooth blend. But I really like seeing the different layers building up. So for me, 3 just works really nicely. And this is the process I'm going to follow for all of my shades of Moonreach characters. Okay, so with this mid-tone, I'm doing the same thing, but I'm not going to put as much as I did with that previous colour. And then here you can see when it dries, you're starting to see the contours come to life a little bit more now, and the shape of that model is really starting to stand out with the highlights getting lighter and the shadows nice and dark. So let's get a nice bright colour that we can use for our highlight. And again, I'm mixing it in with the previous colour so I can get a good idea of just how strong it's going to be when it's placed on top of it. This is where the wet palette really helps. I'm just mixing it in. All these paints are going to stay wet for a long time. You could even come back the next day and still use these. So that's really great. And I'm going to take my brush, wash it off in the water, and then I'm going to dry it a little bit before just pulling it and rolling it through the paint to keep the tip of my brush nice and pointy. And then I'm going to add the highlight, and this is going to be even thinner than the previous colour we put on. Really now just picking out parts of the model that are going to get the most highlight, that are really going to stand out. And what I'm trying to do is just use brush strokes that go down the model, and that's just going to follow the shape of it and the flow of that material that is the banner, and then hopefully that's going to add to the effect as well. And that's all there is to it. I'm going to follow this process for all the different colours, going back to the original base colour before then mixing up a lighter version of it, and then following the different textures, contours of the model, getting lighter as we go, mixing the paints on the wet palette. That's going to give me lots of control and a really good idea about how the paints are going to look once we start layering them up on top of each other. And using fewer paints like this, I've really enjoyed it. It's been a great process. Of course, if you've got loads of paints and you've got all the different colours already, you could just do that. But I think it's a good fun exercise just to mix the paints yourself. And certainly if you just want to maybe take the paints out somewhere, you go on a holiday and want to take some paints with you, just taking a limited palette is a real fun way of doing it. It's not going to take up loads of room, and then you could easily transport the paints wherever you want to go. And I really love these two thin coats paints. I can certainly recommend them. The white's always been my favourite, but I love this shade. I think the effect that it gives is so much better than Agrac's Earthshade, so I definitely recommend that. And out of all the paints I've used in this video, I don't think there's one that I'm not happy with. Okay, there we go. That's the process that I've used to paint Greymair, this awesome new character from Moonstone. And I'm going to be painting the whole faction in this same style. For the base, I've gone for something nice and simple, nice dark base. I put some skulls in there, which seems weird for the Moonstone characters previously. I wouldn't have done that, but for this faction, I think it definitely suits it. And I've gone with a nice dark blue flower at the bottom as well, because I want this to just serve as a background to the model itself. So there we go, that's the process. It's kind of a new process for me. I would normally use contrast paints a lot. With some of the previous characters I've painted for Moonstone, I have done this layering effect. But I found I was using a lot of paints, and I really wanted to do something a little bit more minimalistic, and this really kind of fitted in with it. So I think this has been a great fun exercise. I'm really happy with the results. It's certainly making me think a lot more about the colours I'm using and what I can achieve with these fewer paints together, and I definitely recommend you giving it a go. I really love this character, and I've been looking forward to getting Greymair painted up for a long time, so it's awesome to finally have him ready for the table. And look out soon, because I'm going to be doing some videos not just on painting, but also on the characters and what they can do, because the Shades of Moonreach is a new faction, and they're going to bring some new skills and abilities to the table that I think are going to add a ton of fun to the game. So if you're a fan of Moonstone already, then look out for those videos coming soon. And if you're new to the game, then you can see all the how to play videos and loads more information here on the channel. But I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. Maybe this is something you want to try out, a little step up from using the contrast paints. And I really like this method of using the three colours for the base, the midtone and the highlight, because up close it can sometimes look a little bit odd, but remember, when you're playing the game, you're going to be a good few feet away from your miniatures most of the time, so those three colours are certainly not going to look as obvious as they do when you're really looking up close to the miniature. Of course, if you want something a little bit more fancy and you're painting more of a hobby or as a collector piece, then you could add more layers and get a more blended effect. But there we go, that's the video for Greymair painting. If you haven't seen the previous video on the colour theory, go and check that out. I've also got the unboxing starter set video with all the miniatures in there. including another one of my favourites, Jada the Fawn. And for the fawns, I'm going for an autumn vibe with that, so that's going to look totally different. And I think it's going to be a really nice contrast to the shades of Moonreach. So we're going to have that orange autumn colour for the fawns, and then this dark blue kind of smoky colours going on for the shades of Moonreach. And together on the tabletop, I think it's going to work really nicely. I've got loads more painting videos for Moonstone on the channel that you might find helpful, as well as unboxings where we go through the miniatures and their tactics and their cards and everything they can do on the table, and also a full how to play series and lots more. But thanks so much for watching. I'd love to hear what you think about this process. It's quite a traditional way of painting, but I think it's really fun to use fewer paints to get the results. But love to hear what you think, and if you've got any questions, please add them in the comments section below. Thanks again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you here next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games.